Who likes public speaking? You're weird. Okay. Who likes public speaking? Because this is not something I would have done at your age. I would even consider myself doing right now. I started being a parishioner here. About 2020. It was the COVID time. Right before that, I grew up Catholic, but to me, that was going to church on Sundays when I was still living at home. When I joined the Army, I only went to church when I was in basic training, and you want to get away from the drill instructors, so everybody went to church then. So it wasn't the best, the best Catholic life. I didn't go into my faith very deeply. It was shallow, and I tried to control things out in the world. And when you try to control the world and you live in the world, it can just smack you down really hard. So about 2019, I came to a really tough spot in the road where I couldn't see a way out. I couldn't control the way out. And, there's not a lot I could do, and it was stressful, it was painful. And I remember one day when I was talking to my parents, they had said something. I've always been Catholic. I had a devotion to the brown scapular that was still pretty shallow. And so my dad said something like, oh, well, he can't control it. And at that point, I kind of thought, I was like, you know what, I can't control it. And I thought to Jesus, and I was like, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to put this at your feet. I'm going to put this at the foot of the cross. Whatever happens, however this turns out, I know it'll be what you want, not what I want. So that kind of started this point where the old world, the attachment to the world kind of died. I got through the next few months, and I realized, with Jesus there, he kind of brought me through it. He kind of delivered me from my enemies, there was still suffering, there were still struggles, but I realized then he was there for me. And so I couldn't go back to the way I was. I just happened to find Sacred Heart at the time, and we had Father Fasano and Lumberg and Father Vaccaro, and our homilies really started to hit home. And so one day, it was really funny, Father Lumberg, he had the Mass, and he was talking about Our Lady of Mount Carmel and enrollment in the Brown Scapular. I didn't realize you could be enrolled in the Brown Scapular because I knew about this much about my faith. And so he talked about, oh, come see me after Mass. And so I go out there, but of course everybody wants to talk to Father. Everybody's talking, they're all done with him, they've chewed him up and they spit him out. And, I'm like, do I really want to bother him about this? But I was like, yeah, I do. Because I really like the Brown Scapular and I want to get enrolled. I want to start doing more. And he kind of was like, me and this other woman, he's like, oh, okay, he whips out the book and he starts going through the prayers. And, I felt bad, and he was kind of going through it. And then he's like, can you pray the rosary? And I was like, my one side of me would be, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, of course I can pray the rosary. That was a lie if I had said that. Because honestly, I didn't know how to pray the rosary right then and there. I know it involved the Hail Marys, but I didn't know all the prayers, so I was like, no, but I can figure it out. And so from that point, he told me to pray the rosary every day. And so religiously, I went home, got on YouTube, looked up a video on how to pray the rosary, and it was from the Franciscan Friars of Renewal. I think they actually do the rosary in a year now, so it was several years ago. So I started doing that every night, and from there, my prayer life grew. As you pray the rosary and you meditate on the mysteries, you think about the mysteries, you think about Christ dying, what he did for us and suffered for us, and that really struck me, meditating on the Passion. And so from there, it just opened more doors. And I started to change, but I didn't realize it. My wife noticed it. And an amazing thing happened is about a year after that, made my conversion to being a Catholic and going to church. She wanted to convert. I wasn't trying to, when we got married kind of Catholic, but it wasn't sacramental. It was recognized by the Catholic faith. But, it wasn't that. And so I didn't kind of force her to convert then. But she wanted to on her own because she saw what prayer was doing for me. And from there, it just kept saying yes to different things that Jesus wanted. They asked me to help out more at church. I volunteered with Chris with the youth group for a long time because when you're an adult, if you work for someplace, you have to be there and you get paid a salary. But volunteers, they're a dime a dozen, or they're not many. You really are giving up your time. And I saw this was a good thing, being here with the youth and doing stuff. And I was learning. Like, it was great. So I volunteered there, and then people saw me around church, and they asked me to be a Eucharistic minister. And I used to be like, oh, I never wanted to do that. And so I got pulled into that. And then I got around more people, and they asked me, oh, come be in this Exodus 90 group. And I was like, what do I get out of this? Like fraternity, I was like, I can't get anything out of that. That was I got the most out of being around other people trying to learn how to pray. And from there, prayer just led on and on and on. And now somehow I'm standing in front of you talking about evangelization. My old me would have, never believed you if I said I'd be here. So that was a long way around to start about evangelizing. And it really starts with prayer. Prayer is the most important thing to just about anything. St. Alphonsus Liguori said, prayer is a great path to salvation. And without it, you don't have a true and lasting relationship with God. And so if you think about the Bible and the first great commandment that Jesus gave us, to love your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, okay? And you do that through spending time with him, conversing with him, in prayer. Think about it. You could be doing a million other things, but you're going to stop, take time out of your day, and, formal prayer, you can say some of Our Fathers, you can say the Rosary, the Divine Mercy Chaplet. It's endless the things you do, but you're stopping, you're pausing, and thinking about Jesus and conversing with him. And when you converse with somebody, you get to know them. You become a friend with them. You can kind of anticipate what they want. You listen to them, you can hear them better. If you don't know somebody, you don't know, kind of what they want, you can't anticipate it. But as you talk to Jesus more and God, he works through you. And I realized that was what was happening to me. The more I prayed, he was working through me. I was building a relationship. And as I learned to love him more and stop loving myself, and put him first, things changed. So that was the first big step is prayer, and getting to know him. And if you come along, advanced in prayer, they have the formal prayer, and they also have mental prayer and contemplative prayer. And I just kind of, started learning about that a few years ago, and practicing that is great. So if this isn't talk about prayer, but if you get to that point, mental prayer is it's wonderful. It's fantastic when you can do it, but it takes time. It's like a muscle, exercise it to be more effective. And so we got God's first greatest commandment: love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the second greatest commandment: love your neighbor more than yourself. If you take these two things and put them together, then you can go out there and evangelize. Because look around out in the world. You have all kinds of people walking around. So people will annoy you. They'll do things that you don't like. They'll do things that are weird, things that are sinful. And sin confuses things. It makes it, it kind of like darkens our sight. We think, why would somebody do something like this? Sin kind of just confuses everything. And you see what happens if somebody does something, the people around them are like, what's going on? They get mad, they get angry, they say something, they do something. But we have to love these people. And when you can love them, and you can love them even, when they're doing something wrong or they're doing something that's not right, then you're on the way, because that's what we need to do. We need to be able to love them. That way we kind of put them first. We want their good. One of the things I learned that was really helpful to get through this hard stage of learning to love other people was, we as Catholics don't want to see anybody go to hell. So the people that go out and murder somebody, we want them to go back to Jesus and ask for forgiveness, because he will forgive them. He'll forgive them. If they're sincere and they want forgiveness, they'll be forgiven. But who's going to tell them? Right now, somebody murders a child, everybody looks at that person with disgust and hatred in the world, and they just feel all the stuff around them. Everybody hates them for what they did. But I kind of look at them like, I see somebody who's suffering, and I know what they did was terrible, but Jesus will forgive them. I know he will. And so I might not be in a place where I can get to that person. I would love to be able to go up and tell them, hey, Jesus can forgive you. You just have to go to him. But sometimes, just praying about it, because God might send somebody to them instead of you. So praying about it. But these are the kind of things, that have come through prayer and learning to love. And also, I never knew the Bible when I was younger. And I've started to pick up more and more of it. And one of the other things that helped me, with loving other people was a story about the unforgiving servant in Matthew, where the servant owes all the money to the king, and begs for mercy. Like he'll never be able to pay it back. And the king says, okay, you're forgiven, go on your way. And so then he goes down the hallway and, his buddy servant is over there. It's like, hey, where's that $20 I gave you? And starts railing him on it. I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to, do whatever. So the servant goes to his fellow servant and starts braiding him over a small, minuscule amount. And he gets brought back before the king. And the king's like, what are you doing? I just forgave you, your money, your debt here, and you're going over and beating these guys up. Well, if the murderer was the person who Jesus forgave, the family of the person who was killed are those other people. We had to pray for them, because you go through something hard like that, say you lose a child or you lose somebody to something awful, and you feel like anger and emotions, but at the same time, you don't want to cut yourself off from God, okay? We have to find some way to forgive others of their sins. And this is like loving them. Through loving them, we can forgive them. It's not easy, okay? It definitely is not easy. And this is the people in the world would think you're crazy, like hearing me talk like this. But these two things about prayer and loving your neighbor then lead, if you have these and you take them, you will evangelize to the people outside. It's taken me, like I said, it's taken me a long time to get here. But I guess we'll go into some practical ways of how this kind of looks out in the secular world. So I work at the FBI building over at the Harley Davidson, across from the Harley Davidson shop there on 50. And so, what can I do to evangelize in there? I'm a supervisor, and you know what people at work like when you do? They like when you bring in food, okay? They like when you bring in donuts and stuff like that. And so, I make extra money, so why not? I'll bring in like a couple dozen donuts. And so I bring them in, and they're like, oh yeah, this is great, we love this, and I kind of know from just talking to people what they like, so I get certain ones. And they'll come in, and they're like, oh, awesome, what's the occasion? I'm like, I got you now. You asked why I brought these in. Well, guess what? It's a feast day of Don Bosco, and I start talking about, Don Bosco and the church and things like that. I didn't even have to start off with oh, guess what, guys? It's a feast day, I brought these in. They led me right to it, but I knew they would ask, or they would kind of say something, and I could kind of just slip it in there and start talking about it. At work, I've been at the job for a while, and Lent comes around, and they like to go out and get things. They like to go to Chick-fil-A. Friday comes around, can't eat meat, and so they'll come. I know they're going to come ask me, if I want some chicken or something like that, and I'll be like, oh no, I'm going to, I can't have meat today. And they're like, oh, why? And then I can share, oh well, it's Lent, and for Lent we give up, this in memory of Jesus dying on Good Friday, and can talk about it with them. And it's not, like I'm forcing it on them, and they don't roll their eyes, but you're just talking to normal people would kind of talk about something that's normal. Because I prayed so much, it feels normal to me to just talk about this. So it's another way. At my desk, there's a little whiteboard, and there's nothing on it. The last guy had all kinds of stuff on it, and I'm just like, some things are just I look at them well, I don't need to write anything there. But I was like, you know what? Let me try something. So I wrote faith, hope, charity. Just stuck it right there. I didn't put anything else. Didn't say why I wrote it there, just left it there, let it hang. It's like a fishing hook. And what happened? Somebody comes up out of the blue, and she's like, why'd you write faith, hope, charity there? I'm like, well, it's 3 cardinal virtues, Catholicism is enough. She's like, oh, I'm Catholic. I'm like, oh, really? I didn't know. And so we started talking, and she goes to church in Leesburg, I had no idea she's Catholic. She had no idea I was Catholic. But that's that little thing right there, for somebody to see and read, and just brought them in. Oh, thanks. Could you guys hear me back there, or am I mumbling? No. I'm quiet? All right, I'll use this. It's embarrassing when you talk with a mic up to your phone, because now I'm hearing my voice, and I don't like it. So I also would start bringing in bulletins. And does anybody remember Father Raleigh had through the Bible of Jesus in order? So I took some of those and set them on my desk. And somebody happened to be walking by, and I was like, oh, I see you have these bulletins, can I have one? I was like, sure, take one. I didn't realize that she was a parishioner here, because I just hadn't seen her around. So now, I talk to her, I bring the bulletins into her, we have a conversation and stuff. And as this was happening, one of the guys on our team in front of me, I didn't know he was Catholic, and he was trying to come here years ago. I never really understood why he didn't. It was something about they wanted to know how much money he made or something. I don't know, and I don't usually ask because I don't like to pry. Because one of the great things from the Holy Spirit they can ask for is, Holy Spirit, grant me the only necessary knowledge. That means I don't need to know what I don't need to know. And sometimes knowledge is a pain in the butt to have. Like, you don't want it. It doesn't do you any good. So I don't really pry. But we would talk, and I was like, okay, well, I go over there now. And he talked about his family, and we kind of built a relationship over time, just talking about Catholicism and his life growing up and different things. And so because we were kind of building this relationship over time, something happened to him. He was kind of assaulted like at an ATM, okay, by somebody. What happened was he didn't realize people were waiting in line in a car, and he walked up to the ATM. They kind of jumped out and pushed past him, and then someone kind of hit him from behind. It was a big mess. And so this happened to him, and we were talking about it. And at some point, he kept talking about wanting to press charges. And I was like, I was kind of like, well, you're kind of all right. Maybe you just want to forgive him, because I know from just being old, going into court is never a good thing. Going before the judge and going for that kind of stuff, it doesn't turn out good for anybody. It causes anxiety. It's just problems. It's work. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, you had to go up and be called as a witness. Who wants to get up there and be, grilled by another side and ask all these questions? And so I kind of was like, why don't you just, be merciful and just kind of not do this, I mean, you're okay, nothing was lost, I know it sucks. But he was angry, and I couldn't, not make him be angry. So he ends up having to go to court. But he doesn't have any family up here. And I was like, all right, well, why don't I go with you? I can go with you, because at least you're not alone, facing this. Because if it was me, I would be anxious, I would be nervous, I'd want anybody to kind of come with me. And so because I built that relationship with him, just talking about, church and stuff over time, he was like, sure, and nothing grand came of it, I went there and, kind of helped him, and, whatever Jesus' will was done, He thanked me for doing it, and we had like a good relationship since. So that's some ways at the workplace. Oh, another one that was great was I have a guy from Honduras and one guy from Mexico, and they work on the team, and they're always talking about tamales and how hard it is to make tamales. I'm like, why don't you just make them and bring them in? They're like, oh no, it takes too long, it's too hard. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. So Our Lady of Guadalupe's feast day was coming up, and so I was like, you know what? My wife likes to cook. That's kind of her way of evangelizing. She makes like extra snacks and food, hands them out to the neighbors, goes down the street, and it's, a good way to just open up or do something nice for somebody else, and show that love. And so I was like, all right, let's pick out a recipe and do this. Because now when I bring it in, I can talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe, the apparition, Juan Diego, and all that stuff. And, it's just a funny conversation thing, because here I am, just the American, and I'm making tamales for them. I was like, you guys should be bringing it in, you know what you're doing. And my wife was like, did I get it right? Did I get it right? And so they said we did a decent job. But it was just another chance, have fun, and to talk about, work in Catholicism and the different things about it into just something simple. And by the way, the toughest part about making the tamales is when you make like the dough at the end and you got to get on the husk. It sticks to your fingers a lot, so that was a little painful. You're probably better at it if you do it a couple times, but it was a little rough. So those are some ways at like the workplace, you can evangelize. Right now, there's one of my favorite ways to evangelize is kind of like a more passive way of doing it. You see I'm wearing my Corpus Christi shirt. I pretty much, if I'm not in work clothes or I'm not dressed up for church, then 99% of the time, if they're clean, I'll put on a Corpus Christi shirt, white or red. I don't know why I picked white today. Maybe it was the only one I could find. But if you notice, like, have you ever thought about reading? Like, if you look at words and you can read the language, can you not read the word? Your mind will automatically read what's put in front of you. So what is everybody going to read when I walk around like this out there? Hopefully they're going to see Sacred Heart, they're going to see Jesus, they're going to see his name. So anywhere I go, these people, they look long enough, and it might annoy some people, because they might not want to see Jesus or hear about it, but that doesn't matter. That's a little thing in their pocket that Jesus has snuck in there and that they had to read and they had to see. It's almost like incepting them, like Inception or something. So I go around, I like to run, so I run around the neighborhood. I'm in a subdivision, and as long as my legs work, I put on a t-shirt, I run up and down the roads, and somebody's going to see it. It might be one person. I don't know what happens or if anything will come of it, but it's just one more drop in that bucket where Jesus can work through somebody else. Roller skating, I'll go wear it there. My car has a Pray the Rosary bumper sticker, and I'm always thinking about the person behind me when they're looking at it, they're reading it and what they're thinking. And I have an abortion one on there too, and Divine Mercy picture of Jesus on our van. And so these are like little ways that we can get to people out there. Without them, they might not even notice what you're doing, but they're seeing it. But now these things come at a little bit of a cost, because when you put this on, or you put something that kind of like steps you out from everybody else that looks regular, people are going to look at you, okay? So if you have like a bumper sticker in a car that says Catholics are great and this and that, and you cut them off on the ramp, it's not a good thing. They're going to be like, man, all Catholics, are kind of like cruddy, So it's kind of like you have to pay more attention to yourself when you do something like this. Because it is like raising a banner and putting a spotlight on you and saying, look, I'm here for Jesus, and they're going to judge you. They're going to look for you to do something wrong. They're going to look if you drop a piece of litter on the ground, or if you do something, that's not, with love. But the good thing about this is it's not like being kind of like passive as a lazy kind of way. It's being like more like a disciplined kind of thing. Because when you go out like this, you try to slow down. Like when I was young, I drive all over the place, not great. Now, I drive defensively. I'll get to there when God wants me to get there. If I'm late, then in humility, I'll apologize for being late. Usually I can leave in enough time to get where I'm going that I don't have to rush, because there's no need to rush. If they want to get ahead of me, let them go ahead of me, And it's kind of a way of, self-disciplining yourself, because you don't want to go out there and be a bad example when you're wearing stuff like this, because people will look and they'll judge you. Even though the Catholics will probably judge you. So I remember once, this is great to get attention. In Busch Gardens, there was somebody came up to me and started talking to me just because I had a shirt on. I had my girls on a ride, and they were talking about their church down there in the Newport News area, and just sharing different things. And it was awesome. There was and another thing I had noticed in Busch Gardens, if you have been, and you go to the French area, there's a statue of St. Michael like right in the walkway. And before I was like paying attention to that kind of stuff, I would never noticed. But I wondered as we were taking pictures at the statue, I was like, I wonder if there's another Catholic around here that kind of like was in charge of what goes where, It's like, hey, these other people might just think it's a statue, but let's put a St. Michael statue right here. It was awesome, like right there in the park. And so we thought that was like really cool. Another time, not just passively, but you can also evangelize kind of through your struggles. There's like one time at Busch Gardens, I was trying to get back at a certain time of night to play with friends, like on a game. And I was like, okay, we're here at this time. We're going to leave at like 4 or 5. Leave with plenty of time to get home, So here I'm laying plans out. What happens when your plans don't go right sometimes? You can get frustrated, upset. I know I used to. But I also know that that's a fault of mine, so I kind of prepared myself. So I had this idea in my head to go do this stuff, but it might not work out because my kids want to go on the rides. They want to keep going on the rides. What am I going to do? No, guys, we got to go home because I want to do something. No, we'll stay there and keep riding the rides. And my brother was there. And so we ended up staying past when I wanted to leave. And so I was kind of like, what's the word? Not upset, but like, disappointed, because it was going to have fun, with them and stuff. So I was like, all right, I got to try to like not make this, a bad thing, So I'm sitting here struggling because I'm frustrated because my wife, she knew, but she had forgotten, which is why she's like, told my son to go on a ride with my brother. And so I can't blame her for forgetting. I just realized she did, and I wasn't going to be like, oh, hey, I really got to get home to play this game. So them, they can just not ride. So we're getting in the car and I'm kind of quiet, and then she's like, uh-oh, oh, I forgot that we were supposed to leave at this time. And I was like, I don't want to rub anybody's face in it. So I'm just, like, okay, it's fine, we'll just get home. I'll just miss it, or won't get there and whatever. And so, she's, kind of apologizing, and I'm trying to just get over myself. And so we go stop at Chick-fil-A, and I'm just sitting there, and maybe I look a little miserable, I'm just kind of like, but I have my shirt on. So what happens, the guy from behind the counter comes over and starts talking to me. He's like, hey, I go to Catholic church, down here, and I haven't gone since Christmas, and it was like May or something, and he was talking to me about, Sacred Heart, and I was like, well, I don't know about the churches down here, we could look up real quick on our phones, where there is one, you can go there and stuff, and I was talking to him, and I was like, definitely find one that's, that really pushes confession, because I found the churches that push confession are really good, and so that kind of was Jesus slapping me out of my funk, that I was in. And I was like, okay, I get it, And, what happened, I got home, enough time to jump in with my friends and halfway through it, and it was fine. And so I was like, Jesus there, keep me humble, teach me a lesson. But also, if you get enough realization about yourself and how you act in certain things, you can kind of stop yourself. You can kind of get yourself out of the way, because we can be our biggest obstacle. Anybody here play PC games? Anybody play Helldivers? So here's another way. Helldivers 2. So there's a little thing in there where you can name your ship. And so I scrolled through a bunch of different options, and I was like, oh, look at this. Mother of Mercy. Boom. So whenever people join up my lobby or whatever, they kind of see that there. They might not know what it means, but they've read it, and they see it. And so it's just something cool you can do. Or whatever your name is can kind of be something. I put on my profiles now, my Saint Lagardis is my confirmation saint. And so I have a picture of her, usually for my profile picture, and other people see it. They're like, oh, is that a saint or something that's on your profile? I was like, oh, yeah, it's so-and-so, that was lived here and had this and that, and you can talk about it. So just all these little ways of, evangelizing all the time. But I never would have been able to do it if I hadn't started with the prayer, because through that, it opened the door to be able to love these people, stop loving myself, and to love them. And I can't remember what she said right at the end when she was reading the book, but when it came back to Jesus, he just taught me to love him in another way. And so I guess that's it for now. You guys have any questions? Yeah.
What is your favorite story of someone striking up a conversation with you about life?
About the faith or just any conversation?
About your shirt, something you had on
I think I can't remember exactly what we talked about, but the lady at Busch Gardens, it was a long conversation, and our kids were in a really long line for the little dinky kiddie rides, that didn't even really matter. But it was nice because we sat there and we talked about the different churches and the priests we had, and it was just a fun conversation. It's always, and if you don't have their shirt on and you see somebody you ever see somebody just standing there, and maybe it's somebody you've seen a lot, and you have never talked to before. Sometimes I get an urge just to go over and say hi, hey, it's been raining a lot, hasn't it? And strike up a conversation. You'd be amazed at what happens when you just talk to somebody and smile at them, and they open up and talk to you about all kinds of things. It doesn't have to exactly be about church. Sometimes it can just be about life and things. And I've had a bunch of great conversations, in an elevator or just standing around talking to somebody, and it was really good. But yeah, the Busch Gardens one was a lot of fun when I was talking to that lady. I think they were wearing their own shirts too, and then I started looking around. It was there was groups of churches that were there wearing shirts and stuff.
What was the conversion like for your kids?
Oh, they were, so 2019, so Ralph was 9 and the girls were 4. So the girls probably didn't really notice anything. And my son, I think he, being 9, maybe didn't realize it as much because we did have him going through First Communion and stuff. But it was, I guess it was different. And he kind of, being young, didn't really, they can be flexible, so they didn't really notice a difference. So when he started coming with the youth group, he thought it was fun. And I realized, it was important to get him around. I knew one of the faults maybe from my growing up is I wasn't around maybe good examples, or I wasn't around a bunch of good, Catholic kids. I was kind of around, I guess, just, friends that maybe weren't the best friends to be around. And none of my parents' faults, they did the best they could. But I realized, what? Maybe this didn't work so well when I was young. Maybe I can change it up and I can do this. And so I started taking him to the youth group with Chris. And, that kind of grew from there. And like I said, I was like, what, I feel bad kind of just drop my kid off and have somebody else watch him. So I was like, what, I'll just start hanging out. And so I just hanging out. I was like, I might as well just kind of volunteer and do this. And so the girls, they, when you're evangelizing everyone out there, don't forget the people in your own house, okay? Because sometimes, like, I look at that, and I'm like, so we got like a little saints book, and I would read a page a day to the girls, a different saint, that kind of stuff. Work on different prayers. Like my one daughter and I do the Angelus every night before they go to bed. If I forget to do it, she reminds me. But so they kind of came along. The grace kind of just flowed over everybody, and just kind of went with it.
Do you think that the kind of evangelization that you talked of, like be more, like not in your face or anything like that, do you think that would be far more effective? Do you think that's more effective personally than like a more conventional evangelization, like preaching, that sort of thing?
That's a good question. And so I used to kind of think before, my conversion to being more Catholic, I used to think evangelization was just walking around hitting people with the Bible and putting it in their face kind of stuff, because that's just how, shallow it was. But I think, like, one thing I learned is that each of us is unique. Like, Patrick, I can't go where you go to the people that you know and be around them. That's like your mission. Mine, like, nobody can kind of fill my spot in my workplace or in my family or with the friends I have. That's my own unique thing. And so God gives us our own set of people that we're going to influence and we're going to be around. And it could be that from my spot, this is the way I kind of evangelize, is what kind of works best there. But there is a place for, like, I've thought about, I'm trying to work myself up to kind of going door to door and just asking people, do you have somebody I can pray for? Something like that. Not really just trying to convert them, but saying, hey, do you have anybody we can pray for? It's kind of been in the back of my head, 'cause my wife's been kind of pushing me to do that, and I've seen some other Catholics in other places do that. But it takes courage, and it can be tough. Some of the same friends I play with, online, they would say, they say bad words and cuss, but sometimes they would take the Lord's name in vain, like a lot. And I was like, how do I deal with this? I can keep asking for reparations, keep kind of, praying, for Jesus' name, to forgive them. But at some point I should say something, right? But how hard is it to, like, kind of correct your friends? Well, one day I got up the courage to do it, and I was like, hey, and so I'm playing with one guy who is like a Christian. He doesn't do it. He's good. Two of my friends, they would swear, or they would take the Lord's name in vain. And I have a cousin, and he would do it. And I'm just like, dude. And so I mentioned something. I was like, hey, guys, could we maybe just, I know you're adults and you're going to say things, but can we just maybe not take the Lord's name in vain, just because I don't, it would be great. And so the two of my friends started falling over themselves apologizing. Like, oh, I didn't even think about it, I'm really sorry. And I was like, oh, wow, that's not the reaction I thought I was going to get. And so they were like, really, really sorry about, having done it. And at that point, they stopped. My cousin didn't say anything. And this makes me think back to the Bible, where a prophet has no honor in his own country. Because I grew up with him. It's a lot harder to evangelize to them. Now, he stopped saying it too, but he didn't comment at all about, me having said it. So it became hard to have the courage to do things. But if you think, Jesus, I want to die to the world and just do for you, what can they really do to me? If I'm doing something for Jesus, then, and they aren't friends with me anymore, well, then I guess I shouldn't be friends with them. It can be hard, it might be sad, but, it was because I love them enough to say something. You guys want to hear a joke? Why did the blind miner fall in the well? Why did the blind miner fall into the well? He couldn't see that well. Yeah. Got that from Aliens Prometheus. Go watch it. Oh. Huh? It's so good. I put it on Joseph Herder's whiteboard once. Yeah. What's
I just wanted to say I really like the idea of going door to door and just asking people if they have anyone, if anything or anyone that they want you to pray for.
So you want to go with me?
That's a very, I might. That's actually a great idea.
All right. Once I get it together and check a few things to make sure that we can do it and not get, like beat down or something, we'll do it. Because yeah, I've been working to it. It's been in my head. And this is another. Whenever you say you're never going to do something, that's like a red flag. Jesus is going to just, oh, I got that marked down right here. When I was younger, I would never wear a church shirt. Oh, it's so lame. Now all I do is wear church shirts. Oh, I'll never be a Eucharistic minister. Oh, guess what I am now, Eucharistic minister. I was like, oh, I got to stop talking.
We should say you'll never be a saint.
That's trickery. We're all called to be saints, So I mean, we're all working towards it, They say I'll never be a priest. May I say that? Well, guys, thanks for having me and letting me talk here. I appreciate it.